Hello and welcome to my presentation. I will be talking about mental time travel. Mental time travel, or MTT, is known as the ability that allows humans to mentally project themselves backwards in time to remember past events, episodic memory, or forwards in time to imagine future events, future thinking. It is broken up into two types of thinking: somatic memory, which is a database for knowledge, and episodic thinking, the stories of temporal structure events. Episodic memory is thought not just to store basic information, summers in Texas are hot, it is also thought to be what presents us with future decision-making part of MTT in humans. Ample evidence from both psychology and neuroscience indeed shows that episodic memory system is involved both in reconstructing past events and thinking about the future. In the article, Jima wants to address the uniqueness of MTT and put into question the exclusivity of permitting to humans. She is going to compare and contrast studies of MTT on humans and those animals closest to us, great apes. She wants to contrast our ability to predict the future by reconstructing events in the past to an animal's ability to do the same, and whether or not these animals are exhibiting MTT or is it just associative learning. Hypothesis: that comparative work on MTT must move away from the study of the mental aspect of the ability and instead focus on the temporal aspect of MTT. Her hypothesis states that in her research it should show why focusing on the temporal parts is better for the field of MTT rather than the mental aspects. Autonomic awareness. They started by identifying what qualifies as episodic thinking. They made a distinct definition adaptation to the what, where, and when, otherwise known as WWW. They started testing by seeing if great apes would remember where non-perishable foods, the what, would be, and where the perishable foods would be over an hour of time, when. They wanted to see if they could do it in the succession and saw that if done multiple times that great apes are able to pick the right choice twice. Even in the slightest difference, in the first 5 minutes the great apes chose the grapes and the grape juice an hour later showing signs of MTT. Problems with the first experiment. Though in a way these experiments prove that animals experience episodic memory, it also does not account for the autonomic consciousness in its role in episodic memory. Autonomic consciousness is the ability to place oneself in the past and future. This is an essential thing needed when seeing if something is experiencing MTT. They are also unable to see if animals can imply contextual if something needs to happen in the future as for them to get their way. They put themselves in the future needing something, doing something to help themselves down the line. The next experience on animals involving episodic memory. The next experience is used on rats to see if they can imply things contextually to solve the future problems. To do this, they broaden their memory of WWW from what, where, and when to what happened, where, and which. This makes it so that the rats have to imply things for future events to get what they want. The rats were put in an E-shaped maze with two novel objects. They would use wired mesh or black cloth to cover the maze and would present them with the different contexts where they would only get the object they desired if they did the same thing they did before and applied the current context. The rats remembered where the objects were and applied the context of situations given, showing they were able to put themselves in future situations. This is not a trained task as well, since they would only do it once with the rats, making it close to episodic memory. The socialization was not specified well in the research for this test. The spoon test. Great apes were given a task to see if they could figure out what tool to use to get out the reward. They were put in separate rooms from the reward and given 24 hours to pick the tool they needed before they went out and got a reward again. This shows that they would put themselves in this situation in the future to figure it out. Flaws. That apes disregarded an immediate, small, but highly liked reward in favor of the appropriate tool that would give access to future larger reward. That the functional tool was not selected merely on the biases of being a associative learned stimulus, but rather on its functionality. This is not the same problem as the other experiment, but is a problem in fact that it correlation to episodic thinking. Humans and episodic memory. We have successfully implemented the spoon test in testing the episodic memory of humans. Human babies ranging from the age 3 to 4 were shown a lock to a treasure chest that was a triangle shape. They were then taken to another room for 15 minutes where they had to choose one of the 4 keys so they could unlock the chest. The older the subject, the better. Their efficiency for finding which key and their failure coincide with how long they were left in the other room. However, again, this only tests the who, what, and where, and not what happened, where, and which. This then caused the two-step spoon test, which tests if they would truly know what key to choose to pick for the future and what was affecting now, as stated in research. The two-step spoon test, human. In this test, children were tasked with picking a key with 2 possible outcomes occurring in the future. They had to discover the future needs, play the marble run game, and account for this things happening now for this future to happen. This would show a clear happening of episodic thinking, as children would be putting themselves mentally in the future circumstances. They had to find the key, then get the marbles, then unlock the room with another key so they could then play the marble game. Children's ages 3 and 4 get the marbles but would not reason to take another key to get into the next room with the game associated with the marbles. It was not until age 5 when they would take both keys so they could play the marble game. This shows by age 5 children are developed enough to show signs of putting themselves in the future situations to get what they desire, the marble run game. This is the key on showing our understanding for episodic memory as instead of spontaneous asking these children to solve a problem. Their task was accounting for future events and are shown doing it successfully. Similarities between humans and apes correlation to future thinking. To test if great apes and humans are similar in the way they use MTT, they used a Middlelist test. In the test, a reward will come from 2 tubes in a Y shape. They wanted to see if the great apes or children would put their hands on both tubes to ensure the reward. As a result, they found that only the 4-year-olds would do this and the 2-year-olds and the great apes would not, showing the lack of future thinking. Though this experiment does a good job at showing the contrasts of great apes and human child's future thinking, it fails to include if these animals have a consciousness. Even with not doing so, it still proves that MTT is inherently human, but the lack of consciousness plays a key aspect in our next slide. One theory for MTT being uniquely human is that it requires a concept of time, and it is completely up for debate whether or not animals have a sense of time. To test how animals experience time, a scientist named Robert developed a test to figure this out. Roberts developed a test in which subjects, in this case rats, could use a different temporal cues to find food. When the time of the day in which an event occurred, how long ago, a time lapse between events, or both, when and how long ago. Rats were able to use how long ago cues, suggesting they can solve the WW task by keeping track of the time rather than by recollecting past events. This experience allowed him to claim that anticipation of the most approximate event in a sequence of future events is essential for demonstrating future planning, meaning that episodic memory could be tested in animals as long as they could approximate how long ago something had happened or how long ago until something is about to happen. Mental presentational. When discussing the plan of consciousness, animals might experience, we want to talk about animals that are not humans and their kids' perspectives from what scientists have observed. Baby animals tend to not have an established relationship between the current and past reality, giving up their ability to put themselves in the future. This observation could cause us to disregard the spoon test in animals at great apes, and those tests could be picking the tools based on clues, and not because of their ability to put themselves in the future. This, however, shows that we should then focus on the temporal events such as stated in the hypotheses to gather better data on the MTT. Conclusion. Though the research was not 100% definitive, the research definitely showed that animals have sense of past, present, and future, even if they are not able to put themselves in those places that we know of. We cannot say they use MTT for certain, as there is a large hole in our understanding of their consciousness, which is why we should focus on the temporal side of MTT rather than the mental side as stated in the hypotheses at the beginning. This is because the ability to put oneself in the past or present should not have the automatic awareness accounted for when considering MTT, as some animals might not be fully automatic aware but still possesses the ability to put themselves in the future and the past. Nevertheless, we can understand that animals are able to recapitulate the effect of putting themselves in the future by either using MTT or using repetitive learning to figure out solutions. Though in the research it is clear that MTT is uniquely human, it is evident that animals do have a concept and perception of time, but due to their inability to elaborate is not clear to what they extent they do experience time, and it is applicable in a task they conquer.